Let me remind you that we are on a wildlife refuge here as well as the Space Center, and basically everything that's not being used for space-related projects is being maintained as a wildlife refuge. The refuge is home to between 5,000 and 6,000 alligators. It's difficult to get an accurate count because every time we send someone out to count them, they don't come back. But we've come up with what we think is a pretty good solution to that problem. We're going to recruit other alligators to do the counting for us. We'll give them a clipboard and a pen, of course, to keep their records, and to distinguish them from the others, we're going to give them a white vest, and we'll call them investigators. That's about the response I expected. But the sad thing is that that's the best I've gotten. So as far as humor is concerned, it'll go downhill from there. Okay, just up ahead at the light, we're going to make a right-hand turn, but I'd like for you to be looking to the right. And as we clear these trees, you can see a rocket standing in front of our badging station. And that rocket is very significant. It's a Mercury Redstone rocket. The rocket itself is the Redstone rocket. The black capsule is the Mercury capsule. And the red structure on top of the capsule is a launch abort system. And I'll say more about the launch abort system a little later in the tour. But this is important because it was an identical setup like this in which Alan Shepard flew in 1961 to become the first American in space. And so that is identical to the rocket configuration that launched the United States into human spaceflight. Now, Bob Cabana is a 4-time space shuttle astronaut, and he was on the mission that took the very first pieces of the space station into orbit for assembly. And he is now the director of the Kennedy Space Center, and he's on our first video to welcome everyone.
Hi, I'm Bob Cabana, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to NASA's John F. Kennedy Space Center. From launching the first Americans into space to launching humans to the moon, we've launched and carried the dreams of a nation. None of it would have been possible without the tremendous team that made it happen here on the Space Coast. It has made possible the launch of every American vehicle that carried a crew into space since that first flight 50 years ago. During this tour, you'll get a unique, behind-the-scenes look at how America wrote many significant chapters in human and robotic space history. Most recently, the Space Shuttle program that launched 135 missions culminated in the assembly of the International Space Station in low Earth orbit. The station is truly an engineering marvel and a testament to what we can accomplish when we all work together. I think one of the most enduring legacies will be the international cooperation that we've achieved in building and operating it. It's provided us the framework for how we will move forward as we explore beyond our home planet. Not as explorers from any one country, but as explorers from planet Earth. You're visiting the center at a very exciting time. Since the end of the Space Shuttle program, we've been working on groundbreaking missions that are paving the way to the future. We're focused on launching scientific and research satellites, restoring the U.S. capability to launch humans into space from American soil, forging commercial partnerships, modernizing our infrastructure and facilities to support the growing variety of government and commercial activities and missions, and working toward long-term human exploration missions on our journey to Mars. For the first time since the end of the Apollo program, which took us to the moon, NASA is taking steps to send astronauts into deep space with the new Orion exploration vehicle. We have the first spacecraft in history able to transport crews to destinations further than we've ever gone before, including Mars. As capable as Apollo was, the longest round-trip mission to the moon was only 12 days. Orion could sustain a crew of 4 up to 21 days, and when coupled with a habitability module, will allow us to undertake human missions to Mars, which will require close to a 2-year round trip. The vehicle that will carry Orion is the Space Launch System, or SLS. SLS will be the most powerful rocket in history, but more important, it's designed to be flexible and evolvable in order to meet a wide variety of crew and cargo mission requirements. As I said, you're in for a very special experience today. Enjoy yourself as you get a unique look at NASA and Kennedy Space Center's past historic achievements, an exciting peek at our current innovative activities, and an eye-opening view of our amazing future. Again, welcome to the John F. Kennedy Space Center.
Many of you probably already know this, but the U.S. space program actually began out at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, which is a little bit east of here. They began with the Mercury and Gemini missions in the 60s. But in 1961, our president, John F. Kennedy, challenged us to send a man to the moon and return him safely to Earth. And he thought we should be able to accomplish that before the end of that decade. That was a pretty bold undertaking for us at the time, considering the fact that Alan Shepard had just launched in that Mercury capsule like we saw back there, and he just went into space and right back down. I mean, he didn't even orbit the Earth. And to talk about going to the moon with no more experience and capabilities than we had at the time was a pretty ambitious undertaking. And if we were going to be able to accomplish it, it was going to require a much broader range of technology than we had, but it was also going to require much more substantial launch pads and much larger facilities. And so that's the reason the Kennedy Space Center came into being. And one of those larger facilities that they completed in 1966 is directly in front of us, the Vehicle Assembly Building, or the VAB. The VAB is one of the largest buildings by volume on the entire planet. And I say it's one of the largest by volume because, of course, we know it's not the tallest building on the planet, although it does stand an amazing 525 feet tall. But get this, it covers 8 acres of land. So it's a huge building. It was built originally, of course, for those Saturn V rockets that propelled the Apollo program, and they're huge. And so it has 4 high bays, 2 on the west side, bays 2 and 4, and 2 on the east side, bays 1 and 3. And the doors to those bays are 456 feet high. It takes about 45 minutes for one of those doors to open completely. So yeah, it's a huge building. They say that you could actually put the Yankees baseball stadium on top of it and still have room left over for parking. And I think that would be an excellent place for the Yankees baseball stadium. Hope I didn't offend any Yankees fan. So, yeah, it's a big building.
Just ahead is one of the world's largest buildings by volume, the Vehicle Assembly Building, or VAB. It was built for the Apollo program in the 1960s and stands 525 feet or 160 meters high. The American flag you see on the front is 21 stories tall. The VAB is where everything comes together before a launch. The Apollo and Space Shuttle vehicles were assembled for flight in the VAB. This cavernous facility contains 4 huge bays where the spacecraft were assembled using massive overhead bridge cranes for highly complex maneuvers. Today, the VAB is being updated to assemble our next human-rated launch vehicle, the Space Launch System, or SLS. The SLS is the most powerful rocket in history and has an evolvable design that ranges from 321 to 384 feet tall, depending on mission requirements. This rocket will someday help NASA to reach its goal of human exploration of Mars. The large tower next to the VAB is the mobile launcher being built for SLS. When completed, it will carry the massive launch vehicle on top of the crawler transporter to pad 39B. You'll learn more about the launch of SLS when we get to the launch pad. Adjacent to the VAB is the Launch Control Center, the distinctively shaped four-story building which houses the launch team. This is where the ground controllers, engineers, and launch directors monitor the spacecraft and manage all the activities leading up to launch.
Electrical Station
ฝั่งนี้อะไรนะ
อันนี้สถานีไฟฟ้า
Okay, just ahead we will make a right-hand turn onto Launcher Road, but keep looking to your right, and as we near Launcher Road you'll begin to be able to see the two crawler transporters. They're parked right here on our right, and these are the two crawler transporters that NASA has always used to transport the launch vehicle, whether it was the shuttle or the Apollo Saturn V rockets with the Apollo program or whatever. They transport them from the VAB over to the launch pad. It's about, it's a little more than 3 miles from here to the launch pad. And so if you've ever seen televised coverage of, for example, the shuttle just being slowly transported to the launch pad, it was one of these two vehicles that was carrying it. The one nearer to us here is being upgraded. They're working on it right now. It's been inside the VAB where it received enhanced lifting capacity and several upgrades, and it's being prepped to transport that mobile launch platform there for the SLS. So this is the crawler that will transport the SLS rocket that is going to propel the mission to Mars. Now the structure that we see here to our right is the mobile launch platform for the space shuttle. This is one of the platforms that they use, but as you can see, it sits on piers, and the way this works is the crawler would move underneath the platform and pick it up and take it inside the VAB. And then they would put the shuttle and its external fuel tanks and everything ready for launch would be on top of this platform. Then the crawler would transport the whole thing out to the launch pad and set it down and move away, and the shuttle would launch directly off this platform. So you can see the blast ports, two in the back for the solid rocket boosters, and then the one here in the foreground for the shuttle's main engine. I don't know, I always had envisioned that the rocket was just sitting flat down on the launch pad, but they actually launch from these mobile platforms. And then the next structure here is the brand new mobile launcher for SLS. And so this is the future right before your eyes. And as you can see, SLS is not just in the planning stages any longer. It's in the final stages of construction. This tower stands 356 feet high, houses all the electronics, communication equipment, and hardware necessary to control the launch vehicle, but it also features an elevator that will give those astronauts access to the Orion crew capsule that will be mounted on top of the rocket. And so this is the platform from which the SLS will launch. And as you can see, it also sits on piers so that that newly renovated crawler can move underneath it and pick it up. And the crawler will take it inside the VAB. It will take it inside high bay number 3. And high bay number 3 is being modified for SLS right now. So And high bay number 3 is the first door that we'll come to when we get around to the east side of the building here. And I can see it's partially open. They've got a couple or 2 or 3 sections of it open. And so the crawler will take the platform inside that door. The SLS rocket with the Orion crew capsule will be placed on top of it. Then the crawler will bring the whole thing out onto this rock roadway. The rock roadway is the crawler way. It was developed specifically for the crawler, and it goes all the way from here to the launch pad. And so this roadway is about 7 feet deep, and it has various layers of rock and fill. The top 8 to 12 inches is river rock. And they use that kind of rock because, for one reason, as the crawler moves across it and it crushes down under the weight of the crawler, it packs together very tightly and makes a really smooth ride for the crawler, which translates to a smooth ride for the rocket that it's transporting. But not only that, this kind of rock, as it crushes down under the weight of the crawler, it does not generate any kind of sparks. And so if you're transporting the most powerful rocket in history, you certainly don't want to generate any unintentional sparks. So the crawler moves very, very slowly with that platform and the rocket on top. It takes it between 6 and 8 hours to make the 3-mile journey from here to the launch pad. And if you're interested in fuel economy, it gets a heartbreaking 32 feet per gallon. How would you like to buy the fuel for that? Oh, wait a minute.
We are now approaching
You actually do.
The Apollo program, and is where all 12 moonwalkers began their historic journeys. You'll learn more about the Apollo program when you get to the Apollo Saturn V Center.
ก็เอาจรวดจากจุดลงประกอบไปที่
Following the end of
launch
the
pad
Apollo program, Pad 39A was the site that launched Skylab, the first U.S. space station to orbit the Earth on May 14,
เราไปแล้วแต่ว่าปกติมันจะเอายืดเส้นเลื่อนที่ใช้เวลา8 ชั่วโมงพาจรวดจาก
long-duration space flight. During 1973 and 1974, 3 Skylab crews were launched on missions of 28, 59, and 84 days. The first space shuttle mission was launched from here on April 12, 1981. Over a period of 30 years, there were a total of 135 shuttle missions. 82 lifted off from this launch pad. The reusable space shuttle system transformed the way we operate in space. The space shuttle launched dozens of communication satellites, as well as robotic spacecraft on groundbreaking missions to Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. Not only did the shuttle deploy the Hubble Space Telescope in 1990, but it conducted 5 repair and upgrade missions that enabled the Hubble to literally rewrite astronomy textbooks. The Space Shuttle program ultimately assured its place in history with the complex on-orbit assembly of the International Space Station, the ISS. The shuttle made 37 flights to construct the station, which is larger than an American football field and can be seen at night orbiting Earth with the naked eye. This unique scientific platform allows researchers from all over the world to work on innovative experiments and help to enable NASA's long-term human exploration plans.
Okay, just ahead up to the left, you can already begin to see Launch Pad 39A, and you'll get a much closer view than this, but this is that historic location you just heard about on the video. This is where every one of the Apollo moon launches took place. And that means that every one of the 12 astronauts who walked on the moon began his journey from right here. Also in 1973, Skylab launched from here. In 1981, the very first shuttle flight launched from here. 82 shuttle flights in all. The final shuttle mission was launched from here in 2011. So it's a very historic place, and it continues to make history because SpaceX has leased this launch pad for the next 20 years, and that's where they launched their Falcon Heavy just a couple of months ago. Now, if you'll look to your right over across the water, you can see Cape Canaveral. And there are three active launch pads that are visible from here. The first one over there is Launch Pad 41, where the Atlas V rockets launched. The next one is Launch Pad 40, which is another of SpaceX's launch pads. That's where the Falcon 9 launches. And then the next one over is Launch Pad 37, where the Delta IV launches. And this is the gantry, which is a viewing platform, and you can actually reserve tickets to view those Cape Canaveral launches from this platform. And it's going to be more and more significant because Launch Pad 41 will be the site of the next astronaut launch.
Since the end of the Space Shuttle program in 2011, Pad 39A has begun yet another transformation. Commercial developer SpaceX is modifying the pad to launch a larger version of their Falcon 9 rocket called the Falcon Heavy. SpaceX is also building a crew capsule capable of carrying astronauts and will be launching crews to the International Space Station as part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program. Another commercial provider to support NASA's crew transportation is Boeing. They named their capsule the Ksc 100. Like SpaceX, Boeing's capsule will begin flying to the station later this decade. They will launch from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station just a few miles from here on a modified Atlas V rocket. With private industry stepping up to support low Earth orbit missions to the ISS, NASA can focus more heavily on deep space exploration, which you will learn about at Launch Pad 39B.
Now we're on the south side of Launch Pad 39A, and there have been a few modifications made to the launch pad itself. The biggest difference here is this building that SpaceX has constructed. This is their horizontal integration facility. They actually assemble their rockets inside this building horizontally and transport them up to the top of the launch pad horizontally by means of the rails that are going out the back of the building there. And that white structure laying at the top of the launch pad with the arms, that's the erector that stands the rocket up ready for launch. I thought it was interesting to notice the different way they operate. NASA built their facility 3 miles from the launch pad, and they assemble their rockets vertically and even transport them vertically on top of the crawler transporter. But SpaceX came in and just built their facility right up at the foot of the launch pad, and it's just a different way that they do it. And there have been some advances in technology, but I must confess I was pretty concerned when they were about to launch the Falcon Heavy. I thought this launch pad was, or this building was really close to the launch pad and they would probably get some damage from it. But apparently their rocket scientists are smarter than bus drivers. I mean, who would have known that, right? But the launch went off flawlessly without any damage whatsoever. Now that water tower you see there holds 300,000 gallons of water. The pipes that go up to the launch pad hold another 100,000 gallons of water. So when the shuttle would launch here, they would flood the launch pad with 400,000 gallons of water. And I would have assumed that that was for flame suppression, but actually it was for sound suppression. It kept the sound waves from that rocket blast from bouncing back and damaging the shuttle during liftoff. So again, those rocket scientists are some pretty smart fellers. Yep. Okay, look across the water, you can see launch pad 41 again, really close, really clearly. I'm going to pull over and let this guy get by. Some people, unlike me, actually work for a living out here. So yeah, that's launch pad 41, and the CST 100, or they're now calling it the Starliner capsule, will launch from there probably before the end of this year, and it will be a manned mission. There will be astronauts on board going to the International Space Station. Now directly in front of us is the Atlantic Ocean, and that's prime real estate for sea turtles right now from May through October. But it's one of the reasons why we launch from right here. Launching out over the water, we don't endanger any inhabited areas. But it's not the only reason we launch from right here. Another reason is that because of our proximity to the equator with the Earth's rotation, when we launch from right here, we actually get a slingshot effect and a 900-mile-per-hour boost on launch day. And that's pretty important, because if you're going to get into a parallel orbit with the space station, in order to dock with it, you have to achieve a speed of 17,500 miles per hour. So you need all the boost you can get. And now we're on the east side of the launch pad, and as I said, the Falcon Heavy launched from right here. The Falcon Heavy was 3 Falcon 9s put together. So that means there was 27 rocket engines blasting off simultaneously from right there. And they produced over 5 million pounds of thrust. The most powerful rocket blast from this launch pad since the Apollo era. And if you remember, Elon Musk launched his red Tesla Roadster on that mission, and it's somewhere between here and Mars right now. I don't know if he plans to meet up with it or not, but he said he would like to go to Mars. He said he'd like to even live on Mars. He said he'd like to die on Mars, but not by impact. Here's a couple of pretty good photo ops. I'll slow way down for you.
Nowhere else on KSC is preparation for the future as obvious as at Launch Pad 39B. Built as an identical...
It's an even better one, just a little bit ahead
the
here.
Apollo Saturn V rocket. Pad B was also updated for the Space Shuttle program. 53 shuttle missions launched from this pad, including 12 missions to help construct or resupply the space station. Today, the pad is being modified for the Space Launch System, or SLS. It will be used for NASA's deep space missions beyond Earth orbit, including the capture of an asteroid and, eventually, human exploration of Mars. 3 600-foot-tall masts were built near the pad to provide lightning protection to the vehicles prior to launch. Both the fixed service structure and rotating service structure that were built for the shuttle have been removed, making it more flexible and able to support many different launch vehicles. Below the pad is a 4-story facility that houses the infrastructure needed for launch, including power, hydraulics, and water. Several miles of outdated wiring and cables have been removed and replaced with high-speed fiber optics. The first SLS mission carrying a crew aboard the Orion spacecraft is set to launch on a 3-week trip to orbit the moon to demonstrate the capabilities necessary for NASA to conduct an asteroid retrieval mission. SLS vehicles will evolve to support human deep space missions, in addition to robotic missions and astronomical observatories. In the past, such missions have been limited by the size and capabilities of existing rockets. The SLS payload carrier is large enough to hold 9 school buses. And for NASA's missions to the outer planets, its larger propulsion systems would enable more direct trajectories, reducing mission travel time and increasing actual mission time by years. Previous spacecraft have had to make multiple gravity assist maneuvers around the inner planets to reach the velocity needed, costing valuable time.
We're approaching Launch Pad 39B now. It was originally built as an identical twin to 39A, but there have been some major modifications to this pad. This is the launch pad of the future. It does have some significant history of its own, though. It was the site of one Apollo mission, Apollo 10, but that was not a moon mission. There were also 53 shuttle launches from this launch pad. But sadly, the very first shuttle to launch from Launch Pad 39B was the ill-fated Challenger in January of 1986. But as I said, this is the launch pad of the future. Early in 2020, SLS will launch from right here. And it's being readied right now for that event. They had hoped to be ready to launch before the end of this decade, but they set the time for early in 2020. And so this is the rocket that their first crewed mission will actually be practice or preparation for their second mission. First mission, they will fly within 60 miles of the surface of the moon, and then they'll enter into a high lunar orbit thousands of miles above the surface of the moon. And then that will be practice and preparation for the next mission, because they plan to capture an asteroid that they can study and do some experiments on. And then after that, in the future, they plan to send a crew on a journey to Mars. And that should take close to a 2-year round trip. And it all starts right here at this launch pad in 2020. And so you guys are seeing it all firsthand here. So let's just think about it a little bit. If we stop right here, you can look right over there. You can see the vehicle assembly building where it's all going to come together. You can see the mobile launch platform from which the rocket will launch. You have already seen the very crawler transporter that's going to bring it over here. This is the crawler way, which is the route that it will take. And there's the launch pad where it's all going to take place. So you'll be sitting in your homes in 2020 watching all this on television, and you'll say, man, I saw all that in person. And at that moment, you will fondly remember the kindly old tour guide named Gary, who told you all about it.
So basically, this is 3.5 miles.
You explore to gain knowledge, to push the boundaries of possibility, and to reveal the unknown.
And look out at the track, the imprint of the crawler. You see how that gravel just packs together?
Finances here on Earth and in space.
Was Mars once an Earth-like planet with water and an atmosphere? What happened? Can the same thing happen here on Earth?
What about asteroids? Is there something we can do to prevent a big one from colliding with Earth?
We can go to Mars in our lifetime and answer some of humanity's fundamental questions about life beyond Earth. Robots are doing great work exploring our solar system, but eventually, we want to be able to put a person on the ground.
Now, sending people to deep space destinations requires a lot of stuff. Food and water, shelter, fuel, spare parts, tools, and supplies. It's like a spacefaring RV. The farther you go and the longer the trip, the more you need, and that means moving a lot of mass.
So when you talk about getting past the pull of Earth's gravity, You need a bigger, more powerful rocket.
The Space Launch System is an all-new heavy-lift rocket that uses a combination of proven hardware and technology to make it more affordable. We can take the best from all we've learned from building rockets and combine that with cutting-edge tooling and manufacturing technology to build the most powerful rocket in history.
You can fly to really high orbits around the moon with this rocket without requiring any other assistance. But when we add an upper stage, we'll have an even bigger capacity.
The larger evolved version of SLS can carry a habitat, larger solar array, additional propulsion, you name it. It's really a versatile rocket.
To get the astronauts beyond low Earth orbit, we need a new crew vehicle, Orion.
The Orion spacecraft is a conical shape, like Apollo was. But it's actually larger than Apollo, and is capable of taking people farther into space than ever before. It can protect a crew of 4 for up to 21 days, and carry food, air, water, supplies, all the things the crew will need. Orion is the most advanced and versatile spacecraft ever made. It uses state-of-the-art technology, materials, and design processes based on more than 50 years of research and technology development.
The first crewed flight of Orion and the Space Launch System will be a flight around the moon during Exploration Mission 2. A crew of astronauts will launch on SLS, fly several orbits around the Earth, then perform a translunar injection, which will send them on a path from Earth orbit towards the moon.
Once the crew gets near the moon, Orion will pass within 60 miles of the surface, and from there, Orion can enter into a high lunar orbit, several thousand miles from the surface. The tools, the knowledge, and the experience that we have at our disposal today come from nearly 50 years of space exploration and ultimately benefit lives here on Earth.
Who knows what will come out of the scientific knowledge, discovery, and economic opportunities that result from deep space exploration?
We just hit the tip of the iceberg in terms of human exploration. Now we need to explore deep space. To me, that's the goal, to expand humanity's presence beyond the Earth.
Exploring beyond has a deeper purpose, and it is a bolder mission than anything we've ever done before.
I believe that people still look to NASA and the United States for leadership in space. It takes courage and resolve and commitment. And when we leave Earth to explore our solar system, it will not be as any one nation or culture, but as citizens of Earth for all of humanity.
Coming in from this direction, you get a full view of the east side of the VAB. Remember the door on the right there that's partially open, that is high bay number 3, and that's the one that's being modified for SLS. To the left of the VAB, the shorter building with all the dark windows is the Launch Control Center, or the LCC. And the LCC is where all the technicians and engineers and the launch director would all come together on launch day. And you've seen these video, you've seen televised coverage of these technicians hovering over their computer screens and monitoring every aspect of the launch of the vehicle. And they did control things until it cleared the tower. Once the vehicle cleared the tower, they would hand control over to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Then Houston would control the mission until it was complete. So the Kennedy Space Center is launch control, and Houston is mission control. So that's the distinction between the two entities. You look to the left over here, the smaller buildings That's the press site. That's where all the major media outlets have their own personal space where they set up to broadcast the launches. To the left of those buildings, there's a flag on the flagpole. Just below that flag is a blue box. And the blue box houses the countdown clock. And that's the one that you see on those televised broadcasts as well, counting down the minutes and seconds to liftoff. On the right, you get a full view of that, of the face of the VAB, but that huge American flag there, 209 feet long, or about the length of a 21-story building. So just that much right there is 21 stories. The blue field where the stars are painted is the size of an NBA basketball court. Now, I said I would say more about a launch abort system later in the tour, and so we've reached that point. If you look inside this fenced-in area, there's a red trailer with a white structure on top. That white structure is a launch abort system for Orion. Orion is the crew capsule that will be on top of the SLS rocket. And this will attach to the top of the capsule, and then if there should happen to be an emergency during launch, it can lift that capsule off and set it down in the ocean and protect the lives of the astronauts. Behind that is an orbiter access arm left over from the shuttle era, and this is an armored escape vehicle. Down the street, the building with the picture on the front of it, the building is OPF number 3. Boeing has leased all 3 of the OPFs for their own use, but inside this particular building, they're building that spacecraft that's pictured on the front, and that is the CST-100 or Starliner capsule, and that's the one that will be launched on that Atlas V rocket from Cape Canaveral with a crew on board going to the space station. Now, ever since the end of the shuttle program, the U.S. has relied on Russia to transport our astronauts to and from the space station at a cost of around $84 million a trip. So hopefully before the end of this year, we will be launching our own astronauts from U.S. soil once again. And here are the other 2 OPFs. As I said, Boeing has leased all 3 of them, but these were the high-tech hangars where the shuttle would be brought. OPF stands for Orbiter Processing Facility. And this is where the shuttle would be brought after it completed a mission, and they'd check it out, and if it needed any tiles replaced or any other repair, it would take place in here before they took it over to the VAB. Keep an eye out on these little bodies of water we're passing. You might see alligators. It's always been my philosophy that it's better for me to see him before he sees me.
เห็นไหมเป็นอลลิเกเตอร์ หมดแล้วทัวร์
Well, here's another little body of water. We've still got one chance to see an alligator. Huh. Well, they must be out to lunch. Okay. just up ahead, the little road that angles off to the left is the shuttle towway. The landing strip for the shuttle is just on the other side of that hangar there. So when the shuttle would land here, they would tow it right down that roadway to the OPF. When the shuttle came in and landed here, it would come in at between 213 and 226 miles per hour. But it was flying as a glider. And by that, I mean it had no fuel whatsoever, absolutely no engine power. It was flying solely on the velocity that it had after it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. And so when they got ready to land, they had to have their calculations precise. They could land at the Edwards Air Force Base in California, or they could land at White Sands in New Mexico, or they could land here at the Space Center. But wherever they landed, once they committed to the landing, they had to put it down. There was no fuel to go around for another try. And we are now arriving at the Apollo Saturn V Center. And there's a ton of things for you to see and experience here. I told you about the moon rock that's on display. There's also a Saturn V rocket suspended from the ceiling, and you'll see just how huge those things were. Also, there's Alan Shepard's spacesuit that he wore when he walked on the moon, still has moon dust on it. There's a lot of activities, interactive things. There's even a restaurant in case you're hungry. So lots of things to do inside. After the initial presentation, you're free to view everything at your leisure. When you're ready to leave, you will exit through the gift shop, and there will be buses out there to take you back to the visitor center. So again, my name's Gary. It's been my pleasure to have you on board. I hope you found the tour informative and maybe even a little bit of fun. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day here at the Kennedy Space Center.
เราไปเที่ยวก็เดี๋ยวนึงเดี๋ยวกลับขึ้นมาใหม่แล้วแต่พอใจก็กลับขึ้นมาก็จะมีรถบัสพากลับไป Apollo 5 Saturn 5 Center.
Give me just a couple of seconds to open things up and we'll get out of here.
อันนี้เป็นที่ที่เขาร้อนสำหรับ Apollo เป็นที่ที่เขาร้อน Apollo ไงตรงนี้เหรอApollo Saturn 5 Center จรวด Saturn
คำนี้แปลว่าปล่อย
จรวดนั่นแหละ
แล้ว launch product
นั่นคือออกสินค้าใหม่
ออกสินค้าใหม่ไม่มีอะไรนะโทรศัพท์มีกี่ตัว
มีเดี๋ยวนี้มันมีตัวไม่เป็นไรเดี๋ยวเขาออกไปก่อนก็ได้ไม่ต้องรีบ